Hello there. My name's Eric Hawkinson, and I've been increasingly getting some requests to get some specialized information on some of the research I've conducted over the past couple of years. And today I'd just like to kind of help myself and help others in that process. I've gotten a request to answer some questions based on my research and activities in board games and education. So I'm going to share that to everyone and hopefully help other researchers as they're looking into my stuff and help myself and kind of refer people back to this for future requests of the same type. Just a little bit about me. My name's Eric Charles Hawkinson. I'm from the States. I went to undergrad at Arizona State University, and Arizona is where I grew up. But I've been living and working in Japan for the last 12 years. My work history is in IT, and I'm currently a teacher, and those kind of worlds combined into my research into educational technology, learning design, and technology. And my main interests are in games based learning, augmented reality, in informal learning environments, and gamification of tourism. You can find more about that online. I'll probably just say a little bit about that at the end. I currently teach at the University of Fukuchiyama, which is in the mountains of northern Kyoto Prefecture in Japan, pretty close to the Sea of Japan. Right, so let's look at some of these questions I got sent from a university student in Ecuador. Let's just go through these one by one here and see what we get. Do you consider that games are useful resources to apply in the classroom? Of course, you're preaching to the choir, as it were, here, because I believe games are basically the way we're learning these days, especially young kids. I have a couple of other videos about some of the reasons why games are great motivational tools for young children, but it's really comes down to games are mimicking this action that we all do, and it's called play. It's the fundamental way, the natural way that which we like to test and explore the world to discover new things in the world. We like to play. We like to tease around a bit with our minds, and games are the most useful way that we can express that natural way we like to discover the world around us. Can you tell us an experience using board games? Well, I use board games I wouldn't say extensively actually, but I use them quite often in my curriculum, in my classes. Um, I'll come back to this probably example a couple times during this process, this video here, but I designed this one game here. It's called American Citizenship, and it's a communicative game, multiplayer game that helps people prepare for the naturalization process to become an American citizen. And the last part of that process is an interview in which you're asked questions about American history, civics, and government. And especially here in Japan, where I help learners of English go through this process. This process, the learner or the person going through the process knows the information behind it, but they feel a lack of confidence or nervousness expressing that in another language, not their native language. And so the design of this board game is made to be a very communicative one. And so as you play the game, it's the goal is actually to win the game over and get more points and things like that over other players. But while you're doing it, you're sort of gaining that communicative confidence, and you're practicing those very conversation skills that are needed, like on the spot, as in an interview. So, um, I've had some students say that this has helped them a lot in class, and some of the feedback I've gotten from this is that students want to play this game again and again and again, not because they're learning content about American history, civics, and what have you, but it's because of the general design of the game and how it allows them to sort of practice their communication skills in a way that's fun and engaging to them. And that's probably more important in most all of design of board games for the classroom anyway. It's engaging. Let's go to the next one. Do you think the use of games in the classroom could improve the quality of education? Of course. Um, as we're moving towards a more democratic use of the information, mainly due to the internet, we can find information just as we need it, or information from the exact expert we need it from. And so we need to find a creative way to kind of synthesize, gather, and internalize information that we see around us. And that information can be very complex, and it's getting more and more complex as we move forward because we're getting more and more information available to us. And games is one of the most natural and very intuitive ways to help us hone the skills to see through these complex systems and complex routes of information, sort of give us a structure to work through and navigate complex ideas and systems. And when games are designed best, not all of them are, a lot of bad games out there, especially games in education, they can help with those critical skills, those 21st century skills that we need. Next. Do you consider that the application of board games in the classroom could improve English teaching and students of English skills? Um, I'm guessing that the point of this question is that playing board games, if using them, employing them in the classroom, could improve students' English competency or students' English speaking ability or English skills. And most definitely. And one of the biggest uh, merits of using these kind of activities or games in the classroom is their motivational and social aspects that you don't normally get in a lot of traditional type teaching. In here in Japan, there's still a very heavy emphasis on the chalk and talk approach, which meaning a teacher will get up in front of a group of students and lecture on the meaning of words and vocabulary, the structure of sentences, the grammar that's involved, and then the students will try to internalize that knowledge and then spit it back out, usually in the form of a written test or an essay or some sort of written assessment. And that's good if you're practicing to actually take a test in that fashion, but games allow you to internalize and use that information in a more natural and a way that you might use it in real life situations. So the information that you're taking in while playing a board game is problematic in the fact that you can't strictly control how that student or that participant is navigating through the game and what specific information they're getting out of it. But they're using it, internalizing it in a way that you can't even begin to provide in a straight lecture type situation. So the good part is that they're using it and discovering it on their own. They're using parts of their brain and utilizing information as they're learning it. So in a way, the assessment is happening right away, and the feedback is instantaneous in games, and that doesn't happen in traditional type teaching. That's great for communicative skills. It's hard to assess them, though. That's the problem. Great. Next. What advantages of using games do you consider the most relevant in education? I think I just touched on some of that, and that is the real world and communicative aspects of board games. Digital games are starting to be used more and more in the classroom, but board games are special in the fact that you are sitting with a group of people face to face, and you're using those conversational muscles or practicing those muscles, as it were, in a very real world fashion. So you're picking up on cues of uh, the people playing the game with you. Your teammates could be, and you could have to express different feelings or ways to go about it. So you're using the language that's internal to you and trying to relate that to the other players of the game. That really doesn't happen as much in digital games, and it doesn't happen much at all in the traditional lecture type classroom. So that's the communicative, the two-way aspect, and the real world situational um, placement that board games give you. Okay, next. What methodologies of games do you think are the best use in the classroom to improve students' skills? Uh, so, what ways are best to implement games in the classroom? I think that's what this question is getting at. And there's no real straightforward answer to this, but I will tell you two approaches that have worked and are pretty well regarded in not just board games in the classroom, but game based learning in general. And that is that when you play games, the learner has choice, and that's a very essential part of games. The learner has a choice of where they're taking the game. If they choose to take the risky path, or to roll the dice, or to attack this player and not that player, that choice is essential to games, and you don't have that, for example, sitting in the classroom just listening. So, because you have that choice, if you have a set of learning uh, objectives for that student, you may not be able to guarantee that they touch on all of those things during the course of the game. So you have a couple of options to help you make sure that that happens. And one is the setup to the game, and the other is the reflection after the game. And you might be able to do both actually too. So one is the setup previous to the game. So let's say you're playing this game this year that I just talked about earlier, the American citizenship game. And so before you play the game, you could set up a scenario where the students now understand that they're going through this process of naturalization, and this is the stage that they're at, and these are the situation that they'll be placed in. And that gives the learner some context to which they feel like they can try to pick up on and focus in and hone the skills as they're playing the game. So you're sort of scaffolding the students or the participants' expectations of what they will be learning during the game. And the second way is reflection. So after you finish the game, you can do it in a group or individually with students where you get them together and sort of have them internalize what they've just accomplished, what they've just done in the game. Um, Not exactly reviewing, but they're going to then try to take that information, take that skill, take that knowledge, so somehow that they've used in the game, and try to apply it to some real world fashion. I'm not talking about a test of any kind, like trying to put information in their head to put it down, but some sort of activity or reflection type of situation. When in my classrooms, this usually comes down to some sort of discussion, saying what did we learn in the class today, what happened in the process of the game, and then as a teacher, you can then try to relate that to whatever content's that's being taught in the classroom. So, if they played a game like the American citizenship game, and some questions came up about the Declaration of Independence, and then as a teacher, you can sort of guide that reflection and discussion afterwards into more content-based stuff that will relate to whatever content that you need to get through to them in that course. And because they played the game, they have some background knowledge or some experience to which they can apply that to, and hopefully that'll stay in their brain longer. Right. Next. For how long do teachers should a little bit let's see, let's try this again. For how long do teachers should apply board games during an English lesson? Okay, so I think what this is trying to say is how much time should be spent in the classroom playing games? And that's not an easy one to answer, I don't think. If you have sufficient, like where I said, scaffolding, some setup to the game, and sufficient reflection afterwards, that could be just a few minutes each, and the rest of the time could be exclusively playing the game. But it depends on the learning objectives of the class or of the course. So if you have a lot of specific knowledge you need to have your students or participants know, you might not be able to spend as much time playing games because you might not be able to have that game designed well enough to have that content be sure to be portrayed during the course of that game. I like to when I've played board games in the class before, we'll set up for an entire class usually beforehand about what the game consists of, how we're playing it, what we're trying to get out of it, and then we might play the game for an entire class after that. That's one thing about some games in the classroom is that they need, depending on the complexity of the game, and if you're using them in an English lesson, they might need an extensive amount of setup before you're able to put the students in the game. Because if the students, if they're depending on their English ability and how well they experienced playing games, they may need sufficient scaffolding to be able to play that game efficiently and to be able to get something out of it. So if the game has some specific vocabulary, if it has some jargon or some language in it that your students might not know going into it, it's best to kind of set that situation up so they're able to play the game at least on a base level as they're going into it. Some teachers don't have that, especially game-based learner teachers don't have that mindset. They just want to throw their students into the game and hope that they pick up on some of the ideas and vocabulary and grammar and jargon as they go through it, and then afterwards they'll go back and try to pull that experience out, what happened during the game, and then connect the meanings of that grammar and vocabulary after they've come out. So again, there's the pre-setup or the reflection afterwards, or you can do both again. Let's see. We're almost done. Getting through here. What advice would you give to teachers who apply board games in the classroom for contributing to the improvement of students' skills? Well, if you're going to be using board games in the classroom, one of the things about board games is they're not for everyone, and some people don't enjoy the social aspect of games. There are more reserved students. There's more, of course, social students. And if you're going to be playing board games in the classroom, most teachers want to emphasize the content being learned from them rather than just the social aspect of playing the game. And the students are just the opposite. They are interested in the social aspects and the fun, which is the motivation that they get out of playing the game, and not necessarily the content that you get from it. And this is kind of the catch-22 in game design. Do you design for the content, or do you design for the game design to actually be a good game? And sometimes it's really hard to make those both work together. But even if it's not necessarily the best game for the content that you're using in class, you can use it as either a motivational tool or to drive interest in a specific content, and then you can try to pull that out into the rest of the lesson in your course. If you're looking to improve skills, you can set up something before the game starts to kind of set up in students or participants' mind that these are the skills you're trying to hone. Then afterwards, you can reflect on how that may have helped you or what you might do better for those specific skills. And if you're just doing something like route-based stuff, you want to improve your vocabulary, you want to be able to read more, there may not be a whole lot of room for board games and that sort of learning. Okay, last one. What suggestions would you give learners who use board games in the classroom? Learners. So we're talking about the people playing the games. Well, let's see here. Well, there's a few things I suppose I could say about that. One of the great things about games is if it's done well and the people playing the game have the correct mindset, it's not about winning or losing or even necessarily the outcome of what happens in the game, but it's how the game is processed, how the game has gone through, the attitude of people in the game. So if you're a student and you're about to sit down and play a board game with some other students, simply have an open mind, be friendly, be open to communicate whatever you might be. It doesn't even have to be related to the game, because one of the beautiful things about board games is it's a sort of like a platform for you to get talking with other people that you may not be talking to without this board game in front of you. It's a way to connect with the people around you a little more deeply, and if you as a student are a little more open to the process of playing the game, not necessarily about winning or losing, but you're going into it with a mindset that I want to have some fun, I want to talk, and I want to be open with how I'm communicating with other people around me. And if everyone has that openness and they're able to listen to other people, no matter what happens usually during the game, people enjoy themselves and they get some connection not only to the content but to each other around them as they're playing the game. Right. That's all the questions here, but if you want to know more, you can go onto my website, erichawkinson.com. Where is that? Here it is, erichawkinson.com. There you can find links to my books, my research, my games, my podcasts. I have a ton of other talks online about games and education. You can find that all on my YouTube channel. Links of it, of course, on my website, erichawkinson.com. Well, I hope that was semi-helpful. I have a couple other papers, of course, written on this, a couple other talks on my YouTube channel. Feel free to look those up, and I'll try to put a couple links to those in the description here. All right, again, this is Erich Hawkinson. This has been a short review of my research on board games and education. Have a good day.